Hey, this is Joe Sanfilippo. You're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
There is nothing wrong with your podcast player. Do not attempt to adjust the volume. Hello and welcome to Studio 2009. I am, of course, TF and Mike. Joining me, as always, is Steve Megatron. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Hello. And for our latest podcast approach guest, we welcome that gaming hipster himself, TV's Mr. Neil.
Hello, you.
Yes, we are here, and we are no longer waiting. So for those that don't know, Podcast Approach is my whatever you want to call it, interview thing about people who listen to or produce podcasts. We have 30 questions. Steve and I divvy them up over the next hour or so, depending on how Neil gives his answers. And we find out about his podcasting habits. Starting off, when did you first discover podcasts, and what was the first one you listened to?
Oh, my God. Very, very early 2000s. I can't tell you what year, obviously. I guess the first one I ever listened to on a regular basis would have been I think Scott Kurtz had a podcast, and it was back-to-back with this other podcast. I think it was called The Big Fanboy Show or something, and it was like two different shows, but they kind of hosted together, and the two shows would run together. So it was like an all night thing, and it was like really interesting to do while I was drawing or whatever I was doing at the time. So that was one of the, I think that was the earliest one that I really started to listen to.
Very cool. Very cool.
That was during the time when like downloads were forever. So so it's like you basically picked one.
Yeah, you picked one, and then like there was no streaming podcast back then, I don't think.
Right.
How long after you started listening did you want to start your own podcast?
It wasn't really that I wanted to. It was that I knew someone else who was starting a podcast, and he asked me to be a guest on the podcast, and then just somehow I wound up being the co-host because he didn't know how to edit and I did. So I wound up editing the podcast, and I kept reappearing on the show, and I just wound up being the de facto editor. So that's how that happened.
Very cool. Yeah. It's kind of like how the beginning was Steve and I didn't know how to edit anything. And then about 2009, 2010, I learned, and I was like, and now I'm like, Steve, as long as you let me record it the way I want to, I'll edit edit it however you want me to edit it. As long as it doesn't take me 8 hours, because I have to go through every second of audio. Anyway, what was your plan in getting your podcast off the ground?
I'm not sure I know how to answer the question. My basic plan was just, it's going to sound like a lame answer, but it was just to start and to make sure it was listenable. I'm a very meticulous editor. I used to spend a lot of time editing the old Animation Aficionados episodes, taking out all of the pops and hisses and awkward pauses. And then I figured out that there were tools that did that for me. So after a couple months, I was like, oh, well, this takes a lot of time out of my system. It wasn't really a plan. It was more like, okay, I'm doing this now, so I need to figure out how to do it. So it was kind of a learning experience as I went along.
Yeah. Which do you prefer, audio or video podcasting, as a fan and as a producer?
It depends. For me, as a producer, audio. I've never appeared on camera, and I don't really want to. I like my privacy. In fact, on Facebook, there are very, very few pictures of me, and I've asked like friends and family, I'm like, I don't really want to appear on the internet, so don't put pictures of me up if you can help it. So I don't appear on camera, so I totally prefer doing audio. For other people, mostly audio. There is the occasional video podcast I will enjoy, but not too often because, if I'm working and I don't really. One of the big reasons why I listen to audio podcasts is because I'll be working and it's just something to have on in the background. So I'm not really watching anything. It's very few podcasts that I actually watch.
Yeah, I much prefer to actually listen to it. Like even some of the video stuff, it's like, I'll put the video on in the background. I don't need to see what you're doing. I just need to hear what you're saying, kind of thing. All right, Steve, take over.
Righty. So, what kind of setup did you have when you started podcasting, and what do you use now?
I had a studio mic that was literally just run through an adapter to the PC, and a set of headphones, and that was literally it. And a copy of Audacity. It was a microphone. I couldn't tell you what brand microphone it was, but it was like literally just like a mic you see like on stage. And nowadays there are very specific like microphones that you buy for the computer. Like I have I think it's called a snowball mic. It's this mic that's like it's just like a ball on top of a stick, and that's what I have now. And I got it because I heard that it was like a really good microphone, and then immediately after I opened it up and got it, I saw another review that kind of like dogged it and said like, and I'm like, oh geez, so I didn't really even get like the best microphone, but it's okay. I hear other podcasts, I'm like, yeah, my audio could be a lot better.
What's funny is I have the Yeti. I've had it since 2011.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds pretty much close to what everybody else has. You just have to know how to use it.
Yeah.
So I get that. So if your headphones or mic breaks, do you buy the exact same setup, or do you use that chance to upgrade?
I will use that chance to upgrade. I haven't had a reason to upgrade in a long time. This is literally the second mic I've ever had. So this mic is doing great. My headphones generally fall apart. I'm really rough on headphones. I've had headphones that I basically Frankenstein together just because I break them so often. Right now I have a set of headphones that, I broke it was usually the wires in the headphones I would break the most often. So now I have a headphone that just has like a 3 1/4 inch jack in it, so that I just have to replace the jack once it dies. So, now the headphones just last forever.
There you go. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I know you can get like wireless mics, but I don't like batteries.
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. I don't like wireless stuff because of batteries too.
Yeah.
Did you think you'd be podcasting for as long as you have?
No, I never really thought of myself as a podcaster. I started out as like a web cartoonist. And I'm like, well, I don't have anything interesting to say, except if I was like to talk about my own stuff, and I didn't think my stuff back then was really all that hot. So I'm like, I don't really have anything to say on the internet. And then started talking about cartoons, and found out I had a lot of things to say. So that's just kind of how it happened.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So how have your podcasting goals changed since you started compared to now?
I've basically changed how my goal is to have a better format for the show. Like back in the old days, we would just kind of like get on and just blab forever, and like sometimes we didn't even fact check what we were talking about. And like I listened to some of the old podcasts, I'm like, we're kind of wrong about that. But like now it's like my goal is to be more informed on what I'm talking about. If something isn't actually in my wheelhouse, I won't do it. Like I'm not a gaming historian. I'm more of like the gaming hipster is more a podcast just about my personal experiences. So I basically tell stories about like how I was a gamer over many years. So the basic I know I'm like answering several questions at once, but like my basic plan is to stick to what I know and not try to be like other podcasters, not try to do what other people are doing.
I totally get that. I'm kind of in the same boat myself nowadays.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about your podcast listenership. As a listener, what defines a good podcast to you?
Basically, it's going to sound like a very tautological answer, but like subjects that are interesting to me. Like if it's something I'm interested in, then I'll listen to it. And I know that sounds like really redundant, but no,
I mean you have to find things that you want. Like I'm not going to sit here and listen to a Dungeons and Dragons podcast, but somebody else might. Yeah.
Personality, quality of the recording. I'll listen to like a crummy sounding podcast, but if there's just like a lot of garbled audio and hissing in the track, then I'll be like, and then I'll kind of tune it out. But I basically just look for, anything that'll interest me, like, gaming topics and cartoons and stuff. And if it sounds good, if the host is fun to listen to, then I'll listen.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So if you find a podcast that you think you're going to like, as a listener, what does a podcast have to draw you in? So you listen to that first episode and you're like, it's okay, but what does that first episode have to keep you coming back for more?
I'm basically just looking for a new perspective on things, I guess. Because if I just listen to another gaming podcast and it's just another version of Retronauts, then it's like, well, I could just listen to Retronauts. Like, what the hell? Because even Retronauts, after a while, like after about 200 episodes, like, yeah, this is just the same thing over and over again. So I'm looking for something fresh. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm looking for, is just something that's a different perspective than what I'm used to hearing, and just, like I said, a fun host that's, enjoyable to listen to.
Very cool, very cool. As a listener, do you prefer short 30-minute to an hour and 30-minute shows, or do you prefer longer podcast episodes, as in 2 hours or more?
It depends. In general, I'll say short, just because some podcast hosts don't know how to edit, and they'll not realize that, maybe the huge digression should be taken out, and maybe just kind of, if you're just gonna like babble on and on, then maybe compartmentalize it a little more, so that like the main focus, like kind of what I'm gonna like throw in my own example of what I do, is like the main show is like the beginning, and then like the digression is everything after. So like the show actually ends, and then I'll come back and like just babble, with the guest or whatever for like however long until we sign off. And that's that way you get the topic show, and it's concise and easy to listen to, and you can turn it off if you want to. If I get like a podcast that is just like a topic show, but it takes them forever to get back on track, then I'm like, oh God, I don't want to listen to this anymore.
Yeah, we've learned that the hard way in the last 13 years or so. And it's funny, when you say that, I'm like, oh, so he Ferris Bueller's it. What are you still doing here? Go home. It's over. As a listener, do you start at the beginning of a podcast, the most recent episode, or do you jump around?
I jump around. I'll start with the most recent, obviously, because that's the most indicative of what the podcast is going to be like. And then I'll go back through if I really like it, then I'll go back through the archive and pick out these shows that I think are most interesting to me. And then if those are really good, then I'll go back to the beginning and start from the very beginning and listen to the entire archive. And that's if it's really good. Sometimes I won't do that. Sometimes I'll just pick up from the most recent episode and like not bother going back in time. But in fact, I'd say that's what I usually do. It's very rare that I'll like listen to an entire archive, especially if it's like 200 episodes. It's like, oh God, no way am I going to go back all the way.
Yeah, it's funny. I did that with one show, only because of the way the show was structured. It was it's Part-Time Nerds, Full-Time Dads with Mike Laidman and Chris Blonsky. And when they started, part of it is it's gaming and what they're doing in their lives, but the most part of it is that they were becoming parents. So in the beginning of it, they talk about how their wives are pregnant and what that's all about and everything else, and they go through the birth of their children, and now it's more like, oh, it's gaming news, or it's what's going on with the kids, or hey, we moved kind of thing, or whatever. All right, Steve, you're up.
Alrighty. So, as a listener, how many hosts are too many on one episode?
If it has 3, it's starting to push it. The problem is that a lot of people and their friends sound the same. So that after a while, I don't know who's talking anymore. It takes me a while to really solidify which voice belongs to which person anyway. So, like I used to listen to like archives of Opie and Anthony, and it took me forever to figure out like who was who. Because they'd be talking over each other, and they'd be like throwing jokes at each other, and like they'd have other people in the studio with them. So it's like all these people sound the same until I get like the cadence of each person talking. Then I'll kind of like click with it. But if it's like 3, I think that's just starting to get a little. It gets hard for me to follow, and then like 4 and 5 is just no.
I think it depends on the format of the show. So when we were doing GCRN Wars, and we would pit like Lethal Weapon versus Die Hard or something like that, where you have, or Star Trek versus Star Wars, and you compare the franchises like ships, weapons, this, that, and the other thing. And sometimes you would have to have a tiebreaker voice, so you'd have to have an odd number. And sometimes, again, only in the way of as long as the format is down, as long as we're not going to talk over each other, that kind of thing. Sometimes 5 is okay. As I've said before in other episodes for Podcast Approach, 2 or 3 is more than fine for me.
Yeah. Plus, you guys typically address each other by name. I'm talking about podcasts where like nobody says a name for like an hour, and I'm like,
oh my God, that's ridiculous. Who the hell would not say somebody's name? Wow, that's bad.
Wow.
It happens more often than you think.
So what podcasts are you currently listening to?
At the moment, I'm kind of taking a break from podcasts, to be honest, just because there's so many things going on. But I typically listen to stuff like I'll listen to like not really a podcast, but like Happy Console Gamer. I just put like a whole bunch of his YouTube episodes on, and just listen to him babble for 20 minutes at a time. He used to have his own podcast, a couple of podcasts called what was the name of that show? The All Gen Gamers.
Yeah, yep.
And then he had another one called I forget what it was, but he had another show with Alpha Omegason, which was pretty fun to listen to. It was only like 15 episodes though. I used to listen to Retronauts a long time ago, and then I just kind of got out of it. Not really. Like I said, I don't really listen to a lot of other people's podcasts anymore. Basically just like YouTube. I basically just watch YouTube clips or actually just listen to them.
Nice.
Yeah.
As a producer, do you find yourself listening to podcasts less and less?
Yes. For reasons that I just said.
Yeah. As a producer, are you a podcast planner, or are you throwing stuff at the mic to see what sticks?
Oh, I'm definitely planning now. Like I said, a lot of the old episodes was just like turn on the mic and just talk. And nowadays what I do is I'll generally have an outline, sometimes a script, although rarely, just because, scripting takes forever.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a few different formats. I'll have like gaming memories type shows, those are the ones that are basically structured like a story, where I have like 3 parts, and like for the Game Boy episode, I had split up into 3 sections. It was early days of Game Boy, the latter half of like the black and white era, which is like where a lot of like the really cool games are, like Metroid 2 and Zelda and a bunch of that shit. And then there's like Game Boy Color, and it's just basically divided up that way. And then for when I eventually get to NES, I'm going to do kind of the same thing. It's going to be like launch era, boom period, and then like the weird era that came out after the Super Nintendo was launched. And so it's basically made that way so that like I get 3 sections that are all like basically equal in length maybe not exactly, but like you get what I'm saying, like basically like so that like everything gets like an appropriate amount of time, and I'm not just like winging it.
Yeah, it's like you get 20 minutes, you get 20 minutes, and you get 20 minutes. Boom, there's an hour show done.
Yeah, and then like sometimes I'll have interview shows like what I did with Mike James to talk about his book, and that's basically like I'm going to wing it, but I'm also going to take it into the editing bay and make sure that like everything's paced properly so that it's not like this, because we got off on like tangents here and there, and I would just like snip those out so that I don't sound like quite such a scatterbrained idiot like I think I do when I listen to my own voice. I think I basically like outline what I do. I come up with like a structure of what I want to do for the show, and I just go from there.
There you go. Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
So as a producer, are you a one-man show kind of host, or do you prefer working with co-hosts?
Well, I don't really have a co-host per se. I do like working with guests just because I can kind of sit back and relax a bit more. If I'm by myself, obviously I feel like the pressure is on for me to keep talking. And sometimes I don't feel like I don't have everything that I need to just talk for an hour. So I prefer to have a guest there with me just so they can kind of throw their own ideas in, and then we can kind of bounce off of each other. Doing shows by myself are the hardest, so I do like to have another person there.
I refuse. Ever since the TFG1 podcast, and I think the first 2 episodes of the Pull Bag, I refuse. I have to have co-hosts or guests or whatever you want to call them, other people.
Look, out there in the audience. People!
How do you go about finding co-hosts when you need one?
Bunch of different ways. I sometimes I'll just like do like a cold email to someone and be like, hey, you want to be on my podcast? Like I did with Ben Heck. And then sometimes I just know people just from being on the internet for so long. Like I've known R.D. Reynolds from WrestleCraft for years. So when I said I was doing a gaming podcast, and one of the things I threw out there was a pinball episode, he immediately like volunteered. I'm like, cool. So it's like basically 2 different ways. Like, and sometimes it's just my friends, like Ben will come on the show, or Kitty Hawk. Although I haven't had Kitty Hawk on a long time, she's very busy. But I get Pablo on, who's also a good friend of mine. Obviously, when we had a bunch of the voice actors and producers on the old show, Animation Aficionados, we would like just basically cold email anybody. And I always felt awkward doing that because I'm like, hi, I'm some nobody, want to be on my show? I don't like doing that, but like you have to, I guess.
Yeah, that's the one interesting thing that I found in getting interviews for anybody. Doesn't matter who they are. If they have management or if they have an agent or whatever. Hey, I'm so-and-so from this place. We've been online for a year. We have blah, 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 blah. We would love to be able to talk to this person about what we love that they did. And if they also want to promote anything, that's more than fine, yada, yada, yada. Of course, now 13 years later, it's like, hey, we're from this. We're from the Geekcast Radio Network. We've been around for this long. We'd love to have any amount of time that we possibly can with this person to talk about this.
Most of the time, they listen.
Most of the time, they respond. Sometimes they don't respond, or they respond with a no, and that's fine. I can handle a no.
Yeah.
I'm going to be fighting until whenever to get a certain skull of a joker on here, but that is what it is.
Behold, the Lord of Destruction, Skeletor.
As a producer, do you feel the need for a mixing board and all the fancy stuff that would essentially be in a radio station, or are you good with just a great mic and headphone setup?
I basically just mic and headphones. Anything that needs tweaking, I just do on Audacity. I'm pretty good with Audacity now.
As a producer, how much time do you put into the editing of one show?
Generally an hour or 2. It really depends. Like sometimes if it's just like if it's just like a movie commentary, I can just do a dehiss and that's it.
Yeah. As a producer, do you prefer in-person recordings or over-the-internet recordings via Skype, etc.? I think I know the answer to this question.
Discord.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, over the internet.
Yep.
Yep.
As both a listener and producer, do you prefer one feed have everything, or should each type of show have its own feed?
Well, I guess it depends. It depends on the size of what you're doing. I guess if you have like a lot of episodes of each show, then yeah, I guess they should each have a feed. But I just have one feed at the moment. I really only have two shows anyway. There's a gaming show and then there's a movie commentary show, and they basically just both run on the same feed.
How do you use social media to promote your podcast? How often do you promote each episode? That kind of stuff.
I'll usually drop each new episode on Twitter and Facebook, and then that's basically all I do at the moment. I suppose once I really feel comfortable with it, I'll be a little more aggressive with it. But right now I'm just kind of like being like, hey, you want to listen to my show? Here's the link.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I find we have to do the whole, sometimes I will do this, like we'll release this on a Friday. By Monday, oh, by the way, in case you missed this over the weekend, we have this new show out, or we have this new episode out, kind of thing. Because specifically for Twitter, because Twitter is so instantaneous kind of thing, whereas, Facebook is what Facebook is. Stupid algorithm.
So what is your favorite topic to discuss on a podcast?
I guess at the moment, gaming. I do a lot of gaming shows now. Yeah, that basically is my topic show now. Obviously, there's a movie show, so we talk about movies, and we have a lot of the movie commentary show that I do is a lot more like loose form. So we'll just like run through a whole bunch of like goofy conversations that revolve around movies. So movies and gaming, I guess, is the answer, because those are the two shows that I'm doing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Was there ever a moment when you were done podcasting?
I think after the last Animation Aficionados, we recorded one, and we just never released it. It was just like, yeah, that's enough.
Like animation? Come listen to Animation Aficionados.
And if you disagree with us, you could be a guest on a future show.
Available on iTunes, the Zune Market, and animationaficionados.com.
And then I came along with Pixels in the animation.
Yeah.
What a nightmare that show was. Oh, boy.
God, it would never end.
It would never end. But it did.
Yeah.
I remember the very beginning of that show, somebody left an iTunes review. I don't expect them to get to 100 episodes like a decade later. Oh, look, we got to 100 episodes finally.
Yeah, we stumbled over the finish line.
I know, right? Jesus. Those last 6 episodes were like, what? Oh, man. It's why I always say life comes before podcasting, because if you have stuff going on in your life, you can't sit there and create free content for everyone when you can't concentrate or have dishes crashing in the background.
Yeah. Talk to somebody about that.
I know, right? The editor, probably.
What do you see as the differences in podcasting versus being on the radio?
Basically format. Like when you're on the radio, you have to like assume that people are always tuning in. So you're constantly like, okay, the topic today is such and such in case you're tuning in. But when you're doing a podcast, you can just say what the topic is once and just let her rip. And like when it's over, it's over. You don't have to give the time. You don't have to like account for people who are tuning in. You can just go.
You don't have to go up there to Canada to JT. And now here's JT with the Saskatoon traffic.
So if you've ever done any interviews with famous people, which was your favorite?
Ooh, Harry Partridge. He's a YouTube animator, and he still creates a lot of great content today. He did he's done a lot of parody cartoons. He did like Starbarians. He did He did the Justin Bieber show. He's really, really fun. He's a really funny guy, and he's fun to talk to. And we got him because he inserted a lot of Chris Chan references in his cartoons. And I know the timing of bringing that up is really weird, but that's the truth.
I've seen you talk about that, and we're not going to get into that here.
No.
But I don't know what any of that is about.
You don't want to.
I'm sure I don't. It's probably Harvey Weinstein level of no thank you.
It's maybe worse.
Oh, Lord. Well, we can talk about that off air. All right, final 2 questions here. What advice do you have for new and veteran podcasters in the art of podcasting?
Expect that you're going to suck when you start. I don't know what the other one would be. Just record a few shows and then don't release them. Don't release anything until you know it sounds good.
There you go.
A lot of shows do that. A lot of shows have like episodes that never aired.
I found a podcast recently called Records Revisited, and they review old records kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, your all's episodes are all over the map on Spotify. Where's the first 7 episodes? Oh, the audio sucked, so we just removed those. I'm like, oh, okay. Fine then. Last question, obviously. This is the promotion section, folks. Where can the people find your shows?
Right now, patreon.com/TV's Mystery. No, wait. I'm sorry, I get the URLs mixed up. It's patreon.com/Mr. Neil.
There you go.
Yeah.
Any other podcasting things we want to mention, guys, before we get the heck out of here tonight?
Don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Awesome.
What's wrong? Feeling pixelated? Well, excuse me, princess. Hi, this is TV's Mr. Neil. Join Blanchard and me as we sit down to watch some classic video game-based cartoons. Super Mario Brothers, Sonic, Zelda, Captain N, and more. A total of 9 cartoons spanning 100 episodes. You can check out Pixels in the Animation on the Geekcast Radio Network at geekcastradio.com.
Decian, the superhero webcomic. Decian's got superhero antics and sexy girls. For action, comedy, mayhem, and more, read it now at Decian.com. DASIEN.com. Hey gamers, TV's Mr. Neil here. The Gaming Hipster is my personal podcast in which I take you on a journey through my history of gaming, both new and old. Each month is a new topic show in which I bring you my console memories, give reviews of my favorite video games, and talk with cool guests.
People have made cartridges that will let you play Netflix on Nintendo.
I was making sure that I got everything. I was writing it all down.
They fixed that for the 3rd fake prototype.
And that's the first time I remember seeing real animated boobs.
Find the podcast at geekcastradio.com or on Spotify. You can also hear a deluxe version of The Gaming Hipster at ravinghipster.com or patreon.com/Mr. Neil. For $2 a month, you can hear longer versions of the podcast with after-show segments and stuff too raw for the internet. You also get various topic shows, my commentary podcast, The Big Bad Movie Show, commercial-free Geekcast stuff, and more. All at patreon.com/Mr. Neil and ravinghipster.com.
Thank you for joining us here inside the studio. If you'd like to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show, there are several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can listen to and comment on all of our past episodes. Send us email to feedback@geekcastradio.com. Here are all the ways you can listen to us nowadays: Apple and Google Podcasts. Leave us reviews, please. Spotify and any other podcatching client you choose to use. Follow us on Twitter at GeekCastRadio is the network. At It's Studio 2009 is the show. I'm at TFG and Mike. Steve, what is your Twitter?
At SCP-21.
And Neil?
TV's Mr. Neil.
Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/Geekcast Radio Network. You can also search out Studio 2009 podcast over there, as well as the Gaming Hipster. Coming up next time in episode 26, I'm springing this on Steve, but I did tell him at one point we were going to do this. It's an episode all about the Cola Wars. Man, we might have to have a quadruple shot of TV's Mr. Neil because it's, soda, not pop.
It's pop.
It's soda is what it really is.
No, it's pop.
Soda.
It's all Coca-Cola. You get a Coke. You get a Coke. You get a Coke.
I'm okay with that.
For now, I am TFG and Mike with
Steve Megatron.
TV's Mr. Neil.
We'll see you back in the studio soon.
Hello. Gotham Cornerstone? Yes, we seem to be down to our last Diet Coke. A gentleman is on his way to pick some up. Just look for a black car. No, this black car will be rather difficult to miss. And by the way, the gentleman is usually in quite a rush.